All right, welcome everybody. This is the Kubernetes SIG Architecture Special Interest Group meeting, and today is Thursday, June 6, 2019. I am one of your many chairs, Jay Singer-Dumars, and we are going to kick off today's meeting. The agenda and notes, if you want to check in after the fact, is at bit.ly/sig-architecture. And we'll go ahead and get started with the first agenda item, which is release postmortems with a question mark after it. So I'm not sure who put this on here or what it is supposed to be, but if anybody has that info, please chime in now.
Hey, Al. Sorry, I actually included that item from a couple meetings ago. I remember that Deems brought up the idea of doing release postmortems. Every time we do a major release, they are usually not production ready out of the gate, and there have to be a lot of work to get to the stage. So I just wanted to check in again and see if I guess this is for Deems mostly, but is there any work going on this area? Is this project something that y'all want to start on?
So I can take a crack at this. So the last time we spoke was in April 25th, I think. So we talked about a few things related to this, but then the action item, I believe, was to find a group of people who will go look at the actual PRs that got merged and things like that to see if there was a pattern to it. And we still don't have a set of people who are interested in this work as such. And the other thing was if somebody is already doing something like this for their own companies, we thought we could invite them to come and talk to us with whatever information that they had. That was the two ways of looking at it, but that hasn't happened yet.
Would you like some help in getting a group of people, or just gauging interest in some other groups, SIGs?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Awesome.
Okay.
This feels squarely in the domain of SIG Release to me, and that we're stakeholders in that, in the sense that release stability, I think, sort of falls loosely into our camp. But I don't know if it merits creating a working group necessarily. I don't think it does. I think it's a little too heavyweight. So we may want to have a chair-to-chair combo between this group and SIG Release to sort of organize an effort, I think. Tim, you got something?
It seems like we could test the LTS working group with this, because that seems directly related to what they're working on. So they're already evaluating options and ideas, and having this data collated might help to make a case one way or the other.
Very good idea, Tim. Is Tim Pepper on? No.
Yeah, I think that's good. So we need somebody to actually take that to SIG LTS. Who wants to be the shepherd for that?
I'll tag George. Jorge.
I can take it if possible, if available. If I'm not stepping on any toes, I'll love to.
No, we don't have any toes left. Go for it.
Thank you.
Thanks for doing this, Jorge.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next topic, if that works. Everybody feeling good about that? Jordan, it looks like you've got the next thing for API serialization tests. Give us the rundown on that.
Yeah, can you let me share screen just for a second? I wanted to.
Yeah, let me do that real quick. Hang on.
Okay. So just to give context for this, for a long time, actually, we've wanted something that tests in place that would catch if we broke serialization compatibility. We have lots of round tripping tests and things like that, but all they do is test that the code currently in master can serialize and then read back data. It doesn't tell us anything about whether we can read or write data from the previous release. And so sometimes that's sort of easy to eyeball, like with JSON or YAML, but even that like case sensitivity or things like that, indentation can escape notice. But for things like protobuf, it's impossible to eyeball. And because all of our proto serialization code is generated when we bump proto libraries, a lot of the generated code can change almost completely. And we have no way to eyeball the data that it's producing, and we have no way to eyeball the code that is generating the data. And so that's not a great situation. So as of last week, we now have serialized, fuzzed data for all of the types under K8s.io API in all three formats, JSON, YAML, and Proto. We have it for the current branch and the previous release. And so if you dive in here, you can see it's pretty straightforward. It's just fuzzed data. It's deterministic, so it always produces the same output, and in all three formats. And so there are now unit tests that will catch if a change that is merging to master would break round tripping of these byte for byte. And in some cases where we have things that add fields, we have a mechanism for seeing that a diff is expected, shows up in failures like this. It will say, you added a field to serialization. Is this expected? Update the fixture. And same thing for proto, but it does it in a readable way, so you can see, okay, this is a strict addition rather than losing data on round trip. So this will let us do things like update our ancient protobuf libraries, which have been causing gridlock with other dependencies, without just sort of holding our nose and saying, well, I hope we're not reading data from previous releases. I have no idea, but hopefully we're good. This will actually let us prove that we're good. Anyway, just wanted to call that out. That's something I know we talked about in the past, and that protection is now in place.
Jordan, quick question.
Yeah.
So you had a note in there on how to regenerate them. So suppose we have to regenerate the 140. Is that possible here?
It is possible. The same, yeah. So you can ask it to regenerate. It's not actually going to regenerate the primary fixture. It's going to regenerate the after round trip one. So we always have the pristine one that was generated on that release to pull from. So we don't touch that once we cut a release. All we do is optionally put one beside that pristine one that says, hey, when we read in the version from the prior release and then wrote it back out, here's what we get and what we're expecting. And that way you can see the diff and make sure that it is a sensible diff.
Okay, and will this still work in a branch where you go from, say, 140 to 115?
Yep, that's why it is called head and not master. So the unit tests test the code on the branch and then against any n minus whatever fixtures that are in that branch. So yeah, it works.
Awesome, thank you.
Is there a plan to, I know that if you look at API conversions and the APIs that are supported currently, we see a contract of N-2, but if you actually go back, you can actually see we support actual really, really older versions we have in the past. Is our plan to get that up to date too, so that we were kind of, we're saying you have now a way to have contracts, right? Like legitimate contracts. Are we going to actually push it and make that contract strict about N-2?
So there are a few things there. One is just the actual field names and proto tags. Those can never change for a given version. Like, you can never change the proto tags and the JSON field names. You can add new fields, which we do. This does not test defaulting and conversion. This just tests, can we read the bytes into the struct and write them back out? Like, have we changed proto tags, proto formats, the pure, on the edge, marshalling, unmarshalling code?
Okay, that's good to know.
So if you're doing clever things with defaulting or conversion, you should add specific tests for those things as you add them. This is not going to help you there. This is just going to say, we're not going to get a proto error trying to read something off the wire. That's all I had.
This is outstanding, Jordan. Thank you so much. Really nice to see us moving forward. Anybody have any other questions or anything before we move on to the last subproject updates?
Very cool.
All right, great. So back to you, Jordan. API review subproject. Anything you want to share about that?
A lot of API reviews happened. There was kind of a crunch at the end of the release with KubeCon. There was some discussion about that on, I forget which board it was, which group it was in, maybe it was architecture. And I think we need to do a better job communicating that the way we prioritize API reviews. So in general, things that are oriented towards stabilizing and graduating efforts that are already in progress are going to take priority over new alpha initiatives in general, right? If there's a new alpha initiative that should be prioritized for some reason, it would be good for the SIG leaders, subproject leaders that are driving that to kind of communicate that early and make sure that there's bandwidth to accommodate that. So there was some discussion about that. And so if you look at the things that made it into 1.15, there were a few new initiatives that got starved out, basically, in favor of some beta and GA reviews. Part of that was the overall number of things being reviewed. Part of that was bandwidth around KubeCon. So that was one interesting point from this release. The other is that we had a ton of people from SIGs involved during the reviews, which was really great. Storage and SIG Windows and SIG scheduling, especially, were very engaged. So we did a good job identifying people we can start sharding out reviews to. And so now they've participated in 1 or 2 reviews, and I expect them to start doing first pass reviews in the next release, which I think will help with the bandwidth issue. That was it.
That is amazing and directly 100% influenced by your hard work getting the process documented. Thank you. Let's go ahead and move on to code organization, which is you and Dems.
Hi, so me and Jordan, but yeah, I'll take point. So one thing that we identify, actually 2 things. One working on, the other one we have to start. So the one thing that we've been trying to do is get to a point where we are not using random SHA, which we inherited from GoDeps, and actually use versions in the Go mod. So I have a PR up, which takes care of a bunch of them without actually modifying any code as such. But then once we get through this initial PR, then we'll have to figure out how to update the rest of the things. But the idea is to not have random SHAs and use specific release versions, so that when there is a new version for any of the things, then we can go back and check if there is a CVE or a bug fix or something in the release notes, and see if we do a better thing of managing our dependencies instead of just pulling up whatever the tooling picks in. So that was one. The other one that came up during this investigation was we still do have a lot of personal repositories in our GoDeps. At least one of them got stale and got archived, the Go bin data one. So we have to kind of like identify what others are there that we are using, which are owned by people and not orgs, and see if there are any alternatives or if there is any updates. Like this one was clearly, the Go bin data one was clearly marked as no longer active, and then there is a group of people who picked it up and created an org called Go bin data, and then this started supporting it from there. So we have to go look for other things where we have old dependencies and see what we need to do with them. So that was the second part. Then the third one is when 116 opens up, we will have at least 3 cloud providers that we'll wipe off. So they'll be deprecated for a really long time and they'll be out the door. So that'll help clean up some of the dependencies as well. Those are the ones that I remember. Jordan, was there anything else that you remember?
Not especially. Some of the dependency work that DIMS have been looking at, getting libraries dependencies up to date will be unblocked by the compatibility tests that we have. We can now move those forward with confidence. So that unblocks some of this work as well.
That's all we had.
So I would love, thank you, thank you so much for tackling these issues. I think this is such a cool and interesting topic. I would love to see us talk more about it, write more about it, present more about it. I think we can write a really interesting retrospective on a large project in the use of dependencies in the Go ecosystem, and it would be helpful to both the Go project and the rest of the Go community, the people who use it, on how easy it is to take dependencies that end up becoming liability and how to do it well, et cetera. So not that I want to lump more work on you, DIMS, because you don't sign up for enough stuff, but it would be interesting if we could find a way to get together and write or present or talk about this either at GopherCon or KubeCon or something. I think it'd be a really interesting topic.
Definitely, Tim. So I'm kind of like you're going to use like 116 as one full cycle where we did this, and then at the end of the cycle, then see where we can collect the things that we worked on, go back and look at the PRs and go back and look at the things that we tackle, and then use that to write it up. And then hopefully the people in the code organization, there's a bunch of new people who are in there. So we can get them to, put together a presentation that we can go somewhere with.
Great.
Jace, back to you.
All right. I think that's it for that sub-project. Let's move on to our last one, which is the Conformance sub-project. And Timothy St. Clair, you are on.
So most of everyone is spinning back in, and the release is locked out, so there's not going to be any major additions at this point to 115. We pretty much bumped all the languishing PRs to 116. There was a good discussion at a follow-up from KubeCon from the data that Hippie Hacker presented, and as a result, we're going to create some umbrella issues to help drive discussion for how we want to prioritize execution for 116. So our current plan of record now is to go through, create umbrella tickets, and get everything in place for us to have a planning discussion for 116 in the next meeting. So if you're interested, please come and we will try and get you assigned to the funsies of trying to beef up the Conformance suite.
Tim, are there enough people showing up to take over the whatever work is there?
We have a reasonable, it varies. Sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. I think for this last cycle, it's the first time we actually functioned as a sort of execution-oriented sub-project as together. I think we need to get our sea legs for beating that drum. So ask me again in about mid-116 and I'll give you a better answer, I think.
Okay. Thank you.
Looks like there's some more stuff in here. I'm creating umbrella issues for conversation starters via API Snoop. Is that covered or is that something else?
That was part of the feedback from the discussion from KubeCon, and I mentioned that too.
All right, great. I think that's it for our regularly scheduled agenda items. Is there anything anyone else wants to bring up or discuss freeform before we adjourn early and get half an hour back?
I had a question. Do we have an update on, was there a security audit thing that was supposed to get published for Kubernetes?
I can speak to that. Yeah, it's wrapping up. It was a joint audit between 2 vendors, and so I think we have the report from one vendor, and the other one should be in shortly. At that point, I expect the issues that are found and reported will be categorized, and some of them will be open publicly and dealt with. Some of them will possibly be fixed privately, the way we do normal security issues. So the individual issues will trickle out, and once they've all been dealt with, then the full reports will be made public.
So Jordan, who has access to these reports right now?
The Product Security Committee and I forget if it's a working group or committee or whatever it was. There was a group of about 3 or 4 people who were interfacing with the vendors who were doing the report.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Anyone? Great. All right, well, thanks everybody for an efficient and productive meeting. Thanks to all of our sub-project owners who are driving things forward. And thank you everyone who is attending to listen and participate. So have a great rest of your day, everybody, and take care.
Yep, thanks everybody.